Welcome to Canadian Footy Fan Channel, content for fans, by fans. I am your host, Chris Talks Footy, and today I am bringing you an amazing interview I did with Paul from FC13 Canadian Soccer Podcast in order to break down Alistair Johnston's transfer from CF Montreal to Celtic FC. Paul is both a Celtic and a Canadian men's national team fan, so he is able to provide us with a very unique perspective on this transfer. At the time of recording, both myself and Paul were under the assumption that Johnston wouldn't be making his debut until Celtic's next game against Kilmarnock. However, since recording, Johnston has made his debut in the Old Firm against Rangers in a 2-2 draw, where Johnston puts in an amazing shift, winning over Celtic fans. So congratulations to you, Alistair Johnston, on an amazing performance and debut. After watching this video, make sure you check out FC13 Canadian Soccer Podcast. Their links are in the description below. And a reminder to show your support by subscribing to the channel, smashing the like button, and giving your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Let's kick this off! Thank you, Paul, for joining us on Canadian Footy Fan Channel. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. I'm just saying, woke up about 20 minutes ago, turned this mic on. I'm just living that real rock and roll soccer podcast lifestyle.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm very excited to talk about the Alistair Johnston transfer to Celtic today, and I thought it would be an excellent opportunity to bring you on as a fellow Canadian men's national team fan, as well as a Celtic fan. You could bring a unique perspective to this transfer because everybody I know, including myself, is all talking about it from a Canadian point of view. But you'll provide a bit of a unique perspective, like I said, with regards to coming from a Celtic fan's point of view. So my first question to you is, as a Canadian men's national team and Celtic fan, what was your initial reaction to the Alistair Johnston transfer?
I initially kind of found out about it through like a cryptic tweet through a Celtic Twitter account I like. It was something like, I would just say a Japanese player, so it was a little Japanese flag for tech. And then there's a Canadian flag for an egg timer next to it. So I was like, oh, what's that? Like, is he just talking about Canada's game coming up? And then it didn't click. Like, obviously, I'm Scottish, but I've been living in Canada for a while now, and this sport's my first love, and then I started to follow Canada as well as a result of that. So you get to know all these players like Alistair Johnston, Eustachio, Davies and Larn, etc. But for some reason, I never actually envisioned them playing for Celtic for whatever reason. Like, I was like, oh, these would be good players to have, but it never actually came into my thought that it could happen. So when it first got linked, I got really excited. Obviously, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Well, usually when Celtic sign players as well, I know next to nothing about them unless they're based in Scotland.
Yeah.
And so I know who Alistair Johnston is. I know how talented he is. So seeing Celtic link with him, I'm really excited to have a high quality right back at the club, and B, I'm really excited to see someone I already know, I'm going to see even more of them.
Yeah, because sure.
I wasn't able to catch every Montreal game, and Canada don't, exactly play every week. So I've got to be able to get to see more of this guy. I like seeing him on the field. So I'm very excited.
For sure. I can only imagine, as somebody as a fan of both, is very excited about this transfer. Obviously, the Scottish Premier League is not Scottish Premiership. My apologies, is not a stranger to Canadian players. You got Latourie there, you got Arfield there, you got Wotherspoon there. You've had other players come and go in the Scottish Premiership. So it's something maybe not unique to the Scottish Premiership, but maybe something new to the Celtic fan base with regards to bringing a fan in on the men's side. But my next question is, you've also got a female player who plays for the Celtic women's team, Clarissa Larissy. What does it mean to you to have a Canadian representative on both your men's and women's team?
It just seems like something that a couple of years ago didn't seem that imaginable. It kind of correlates Canada's own rise in that sense. Also they've been a really good team on the women's side for a long time, so I guess it's not too surprising. If anything, it's surprising in a good way that Celtic were able to get a Canadian striker for the women's team. And Larissy's been on fire for Celtic ever since, and we're starting to see that with the national team as well. She's making some appearances, and I think she got a goal or two towards the end of 2022 in some of those friendlies. So certainly the standards been high on that sort of thing. And yeah, you were mentioning there's a lot of Canadians that play in Scotland before. I guess it might be a cultural thing or something. Like, it's easy to go from Canada to Scotland. To I can obviously tell you from my experience doing a little bit around that it's not there's differences, but it's not the biggest jump in the world. It's not as if I've been put on other sides of the world and everything's turned upside down. It's kind of like a nice gateway. And of course, a lot of Canadians, one way or another, they tend to have family or ancestry going back to the UK. So there's people they might know who are able to help them settle in, or they might even have family there who they can look up to, or they can hang out with, so it doesn't feel so isolating.
Yeah.
So I'm not too surprised that a lot of Canadians do tend to end up in Scotland in some way.
Well, obviously, the Scottish Premiership is maybe not the level it once was back in the day, in the 80s and the 70s.
I was going to say, you're going to have to go further and further back.
But it is still a very high level of competition in an English-speaking predominantly nation. So I'm sure that, and like you said, there's a lot of Canadians with heritage in the UK, like Alistair Johnston does, as he does have a UK passport. So I think it's a good stepping stone for Canadians to go over and test themselves in Europe, for sure. Do you think joining Celtic was the ideal move for Alistair Johnston? He was rumored to join maybe some championship clubs in England, for example. Do you think moving to Celtic, especially with the possibility of European football, was the right decision for him?
There's no way I can answer this without coming off as biased, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. I think one of the key intangibles of him having to play for Celtic is a club where you're expected to win every week. And so he's just coming off a fantastic season of Montreal where they won the most games they ever had in a season.
Yep.
And he's just had this incredible run with Canada. So he's going to go straight into a situation where those standards are just as high, if not higher. At Celtic, if you go 3 games without a win, it's crisis.
Yeah.
So he's having he can't really have a game off at any point. He needs to be playing at his best at all times because there is so much pressure to win. They have a bit of a at the time of recording, they have a bit of a comfortable lead at the top of the table, but there's always that you drop 1 point and the Rangers are right behind you, snatch on it to close it down. Europe as well is a massive factor, is a massive thing as well. Celtic can get automatic qualification for the Champions League if they win the league, which is what they had this year. And they didn't really win any games. I actually find that kind of mirrored Canada in the World Cup a bit, where they would play really good football, but they just weren't streetwise at the times where they meant to be streetwise, which is something I think they can work on for next year for sure. So I think the demand of having to win all the time and being in Europe is a big thing. And again, this is going to come across very much like I'm talking with an agenda here, but the fan support as well. I really don't Celtic are a huge club. You go anywhere in Canada, for example, any major city, there's going to be a supporters club. I was just in Ottawa not that long ago, Celtic supporters club there, and it's God knows how far away. You have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch a game, and this bar is packed.
Yeah,
they played in Australia not too long ago, and again the stadium's full to watch them in a friendly. Everywhere they go, there's always a huge fan support. They're one of the biggest names in British and European football. Although they may not be in the same category as say a Man United or a Liverpool on the playing field in terms of a brand name, certainly for the UK and Europe. They're a very well known club. You just had to hear that story Alistair Johnston was saying about him. The moment it looked like he was signed for Celtic, his phone literally blew up or something just from so many people trying to message him.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Celtic is a world-renowned club. There's no denying that. Like I said earlier, maybe the Scottish Premiership isn't the level it once was, but there's a lot of history with regards to Scottish football, both in Europe as well as its own domestic league. I think it's an excellent level for him to go to, and I think it was definitely the right decision. Like you said, having to win every game with that pressure. Yes, it might not be a top elite level club, but in Scotland, Celtic is, and the demand to win is there every game, no matter who it is against, whether it is the team that is bottom of the league, whether it is your rivals and Rangers. The need to win and the need to finish first, and anything else is deemed a bit of a failure, to be honest. Is a lot of pressure, and it can only do good for Alistair Johnston moving forward.
Yeah, like the more players in Canada have like a winning mentality installed into them, like the better.
Yeah, for sure. It's the only downside of the MLS, I find, with no, like, if you finish just outside the playoffs towards the end of the season, there isn't a lot to play for. Or if you finish bottom of the league, there is no real consequence to doing so. So I think there's a lot of, no matter what happens in Scotland for Alistair Johnston, he's going to be under pressure playing for his club. But with regards to playing with his club, for those who are unfamiliar with Celtic, how do they tactically set up? What is formation do they play? What kind of system do they play? And does Alistair Johnston fit in?
So Celtic typically play a sort of 4 across middle, four at the back, 5 in the middle, 1 up top sort of thing, with sort of like two attacking midfielders. That tends to be in Celtic's case right now, Rio Hatate and Matt O'Reilly typically. But what's interesting is the role that Alistair Johnston's probably going to be asked to do. So Ange Postecoglou, the Celtic manager, he likes to implement a system of inverted fullbacks, which is basically involves the fullbacks. They get really far up the pitch, just like your normal attacking fullback. But rather than like staying out wide, they are often asked to come inside and almost act like extra midfielders. Like oftentimes, like it will be the wingers who do the overlap on the fullback rather than the other way around, and it'll be the fullback who's in that more central position. So that's great news for Alistair Johnston, I think, because he has had experience playing as a central midfielder before in his college days, and we've known about how he blagged to John Herdman into about playing as a centre back. So he is comfortable playing in a sort of more central role in the pitch. It is a very demanding role for fullbacks playing at Celtic. Like the two fullbacks I have right now, Greg Taylor and Josef Vranovic, the two starting ones, are both of really high quality. And they have to be. They play a lot of fast-flowing football, and like I said, there is a lot of inverting going on with fullbacks. They're expected to be able to play defense splitting balls to the byline, or even get to the byline themselves if they do decide to like switch with the wingers. And obviously that leads to a lot of there's a lot of attacking play. Celtic are very, very possessive heavy. Like they played at Aberdeen not too long ago, and Aberdeen had something like 170 passes, and midfielder for Celtic on the day had 190 passes just himself. Yeah, they're very, very much into recycling the play. Like the goalkeeper gets the ball, it's never booted up, it's always passed out. In that sense, like Alistair Johnston will be expected to play the ball out from the back a lot, which we kind of seen Canada try to do in the World Cup as well. So he's going to be able to build on that. And Celtic plays into Celtic strengths as well. So Cal McGregor, the central defensive midfielder, he's really good at making himself open for a pass for the defence to get those moves started. At the same time, like Cameron Carter-Vickers, the centre back, is very good at marauding forward and creating space that way too. Wingers, Jota, Daisen Maeda, Leah Labada, they're good at creating giving the defenders options for playing it out. There's never the expectation just give it to Johnson and go, all right, just do what you can, just do what you can, mate. Like at times in the World Cup, I thought it looked like he was expected to just do everything when the ball was played out, and they weren't able to like give him as many options on the ball at that point. But so he's going to be expected to attack a lot, which is good. We see that he's got a fantastic delivery on from Montreal.
Yes, he does.
He's able to get himself into dangerous situations. He got 4 goals, I think, which Celtic's fullbacks they're not really typically high scoring, although they do get themselves into dangerous situations. So like Johnson having a little bit of a striker's instinct there. I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting a couple of goals for Celtic, more so than your average fullback. He's going to be expected to, like I said, play more of a central role, which is perfect for him. He's done it before. He's not going to be too uncomfortable in that. It might take a while to fully grasp, but I don't think it's going to take as long to learn as, like, say, if another fullback was to sign tomorrow, like Alistair Johnston would learn before them, I think, because he has that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think Alistair Johnston will be able to smoothly transition, into playing a more inverted fullback. As you mentioned, he did play midfield in his college and League One Ontario days. Shout out to League One Ontario. But I think that's something for sure he would be able to settle in. Like you said, it's not something that all fullbacks can do, and sometimes they struggle to adapt to doing, but I think he'd be very comfortable doing that. He has done it for Canada, maybe not for entire games, but for portions of games, especially if he's playing with Richie Larea. He a little bit ahead of him, he'll become more of an inverted fullback and then allow Richie Larea to play as a more traditional fullback / wingback. So I think for sure he'll settle in. Obviously, though, he has a bit of competition ahead of him in the form of Josip Juranovic, somebody that Canadians are very familiar with, the Croatian right back. Unfortunately, we got to know him a little bit too well during the World Cup. He's somebody who, although he didn't make my team of the tournament at right back, I think he definitely was top 5 right backs at this World Cup. So Alistair Johnston has got some tough competition to win that starting spot at right back. Could you see this being a potential another Richie Larea situation where he goes to a club in Europe, as in this time Johnston to Celtic, and he can't get in the squad because there's somebody ahead of him who's just playing too well? Or there are rumors of Josip Juranovic potentially being not on the transfer list per se, but definitely being shopped around to bring in a decent sum of money for Celtic. Do you see any issues with the Johnston getting game time at Celtic?
Yeah, to kind of like mention what you just kind of briefly touched on there, like I would be like incredibly shocked if Juranovic isn't sold this January. Yeah. Celtic had an AGM back in late November time, I think it was, and Ange Postecoglou laid out the plans that Celtic want to become a much more aggressive buying and selling team in the transfer market. Like they don't want, if a player's not going to sign a second contract, they want to like get more into the business of selling them at maximum value and replacing ASAP. Juranovic has been a guy who's like, it's strange how he even ended up at Celtic, to be honest, because he's been a Croatian international right back for a long time now. He's able to do really well in like games against Rangers and Europe, although it's funny, some Celtic fans will say he's kind of been poor in Europe, but like he's been asked to do about like 3 jobs at once, I personally feel like, so ignore them. Yeah, he's kind of been like sort of like Celtic's most sellable asset for a while, in terms of like value, but also in terms of not too difficult to replace, I guess. So Celtic have signed Alistair Johnston to effectively bring in the replacement before Juranovic leaves. For years, the business would be more, we'd sell Juranovic, and 18 months later, you'd sign the replacement right back. As well as Juranovic, there's also Anthony Ralston, who's been the understudy to Juranovic for a while. He really burst onto the scene at the start of the 2021-2022 season. He was kind of a forgotten man at Celtic, but he's came in and he's never really put a foot wrong whenever he's played for the team. He's one of these homegrown players for Celtic, sport a club all his life, has that like connection with the fans. He's a real fan's favourite. People love Anthony Ralston. Like we know that he's not the best, but he is capable. I imagine that if Juranovic is sold, which I can see being very, very soon, Celtic are playing Rangers on January 2nd. So, if I expect Juranovic might play in that game. Like, we'll have to find out by the time this comes out, I guess, if I'm right or wrong on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's his last game. And that could be advantageous to Johnston because Ralston is currently injured at the moment. I don't know how long the injury is. Celtic tend to keep their cards close to their chest when it comes to injuries. Like you don't know how long these people are injured for until they're back a lot of the time. So Johnston might be getting game time a lot quicker than I actually expected. I thought he would have been given some extra time off. The fact he's been playing football non-stop since like February, pretty much February 2022, and Celtic have right back cover. They don't need to like put him in straight away. They can afford to take the time with him to get him implemented into the inverted system and prevent him from burning out because he's got a 5-year contract. Like no need to rush him. But it looks like he might have to play sooner rather than later if Ralston's injury proves to be bad, or if Juranovic is indeed sold. So I don't think it'll be a Larea situation because like, Celtic have been they've been smart with the signings in recent years. There's only been like one sort of dud side, like one or two dud signings I can think of at the top of my head. But typically in the under Ryan Postecoglou's reign, the signings have always been made for a purpose. Yep. So Johnston wouldn't have been brought in for like just for the sake of it. He's been brought in because I fully expect him to be Celtic starting right back going into next season.
Well, I expect the same, and I hope the same for him. I know
Same.
January 7th is when he could potentially make his debut against Kilmarnock. I hope he gets the opportunity to play at the very least. I know it can get frustrating for a player to sign for a new club and then you're on the bench and you're not playing, although that is normal for a player to adjust to their new club. But I think for him, getting his debut under his belt as soon as possible would be ideal. I don't think he's a player you have to worry about his attitude or his passion or anything like that. I think he'll go on the field and give you 100%, maybe not be overly familiar with the tactical side. So you may have to forgive him if he makes any mistakes there, but effort-wise and passion-wise, I think he'll give you 100% for sure.
I was really impressed with his press conference in that sense. Like, just listening to him, he sounds so at home. I was like really liking how he's basically talking about how he enjoys the physical side of the game and like how he used to play hockey a lot, which he thinks has helped him in terms of like having a sort of like chip on his shoulder, which you're going to need in Scotland. There's a lot of teams here for what they lack in football talent. They sure make up for trying to kick lumps out of you. So you're gonna have to be like have thick skin, I guess, to play in Scotland. And obviously, it's like not the biggest deal, but it's just an intangible. The fact that he does have British parents, are both from Britain, I believe.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna be like somewhat familiar with like the game in Scotland in one sense or another. Like, I'm not saying he grew up watching sports scene every day when he was a kid in Canada, but like I don't think it's going to be totally alien to him, the idea of crappy AstroTurf pitches and teams just playing Route 1 football to like a big guy up top. I'm sure that's not going to be like a culture shock or anything to him.
Yeah. He's also used to playing in League One Ontario, and it's a very diverse league with how teams like to play. You've got teams that try to play. Well, typically the pitches are not the best in League One Ontario, but there are teams who try to play with the ball, and there's other teams that rather play the direct, more physical approach. Obviously, it's not at the level of the Scottish Premiership at all, but with regards to physical play, I'm sure with his days in League One Ontario, he will be fairly comfortable with it. And we've known from his experience with the Canadian men's national team, he's not afraid of getting stuck in, for sure.
Oh yeah, I can really imagine Celtic fans like falling in love with him really quickly because he does wear his heart on his sleeve, and all it takes at times is to win Celtic fans over is one right good slide tackle on a Rangers player, and from that point, like he'll be immortalized.
Yeah, I can see him a good crunching tackle, and a couple of seconds later, a nice whipped cross into the ball with an assist, and away he'll go into the Scottish fans' hearts. I'm sure. The Celtics fans' hearts. I'm sure they are maybe a little bit. Alistair Johnston is a little bit unknown to them, even though they would have hopefully seen a little bit of him at the World Cup. But I'm for sure, like you said earlier, he's very good with the media. He's very good with what he puts out there, and I'm sure what he puts out there is his true self. So I think he'll be one that will want to have a connection with the fan base for sure. And one that will communicate with the fan base on a regular basis through his own work, as also through the club as well. So I'm sure you're going to be seeing a lot of Alistair Johnston in the future. With regards to Alistair Johnston's future, do you think he has the potential to develop and move on to a bigger club, perhaps a Champions League team in the top 5 leagues? Or do you think becoming a starter at Celtic is a realistic ceiling for Alistair Johnston?
It's an interesting question. Again, it's maybe it's for someone on the outside looking in to answer. Because I want to say, stay the rest of your career. What I will say is like he has moved around a lot. Like he played college football, then he played at League One, then he played at Nashville fairly quickly. He was only at Montreal for like about 2 seasons, maybe a season and a half even.
Was 1 season.
1 season, yeah. And he's going to be he's coming up to 25 really soon. Yeah. He's had a very nomadic career at this point. I do think it might be best for him just to kind of stay in one place for a while.
For sure.
And big part of that is like Ange Postecoglou, I think, is a genuinely fantastic manager. He's done fantastic work with the fullbacks. listen, Anthony Ralston's career was basically finished at Celtic before Ange Postecoglou came over. Greg Taylor, again, his career was basically finished at Celtic before he came around. Josip Juranovic is going from just being like an obscure player who's playing in Poland to now being linked with Barcelona, Chelsea, and Atletico Madrid. He's done wonders with the fullbacks that we have. So as long as Ange Postecoglou is here, I mean, I don't know who Celtic replace him with. Like, I don't know, like say Celtic replace him with John Barnes. that's a Celtic fan joke there. But say they replace him with John Barnes and it all goes terrible. Like Celtic Park's on fire. We're losing to Inverness Cali Thistle in the Scottish Cup again. Like, yeah, get him out of there. But like, as long as Ange Postecoglou is there, and the team are going forward and playing fantastic football, I don't see a problem with it. What I want for him is to be able to just play in high intensity games, where he sees a lot of the ball, and he's going to see a lot of the ball at Celtic, and he's going to be playing a lot of high intensity games, whether it's Europe or games against Rangers or even trips away to Hearts, Hibs, and Aberdeens. Those are some like really difficult games that Celtic will play. I mean, I don't know if he can take a step towards like playing. I don't think he's going to have the trajectory of Juranovic, simply because that just doesn't happen at Celtic. This is like the one, other than him and Henrik Larsson, you don't get players going from Celtic to Barcelona or Chelsea.
Yeah,
you typically get them more going to like Southampton level, like a Southampton or an Everton or with Crystal Palace. Like one time we had a player go to Lyon in France, so it's very difficult to say. I think he would probably want to say Premier League would be his next step after Celtic, which is kind of like the model that is sold to players. Like, come do great at Celtic. Yeah. You can get your move down to England. We've seen it time and time again. And like you look at Kieran Tierney, who's a fullback not that long ago at Celtic. He was signed for 25 million to Arsenal and hasn't looked back whenever he's not been injured. Age isn't 100% on Johnson's side. Like 20, it's funny. 25 is young. It's younger than me, but like
younger than me too.
Yeah, football's a short career. You peak typically around about 28 to 31, and like after that it's downhill. So, he's not got to, in terms of like gas in the tank. It's creeping up a little bit.
Yeah,
but I would love to see him play Celtic for 5 years. I think he even said at his press conference, what would success look like in these 5 years? And he said something like another 5-year contract. It depends. Like I can definitely vision him staying, but like that you can't get too attached to players these days. Yeah. So if he goes down to England, it's a win-win all round. It means he's been fantastic for Celtic and got a lot of money in for him. So I want him to do well either way.
Yeah, for sure. I can foresee him going to England. I don't know if it'll be at the Champions League level, maybe at the Europa League, but even in the Premier League, those levels for the clubs, it's a very high level.
It fluctuates as well. Like I don't know what a Europa League club is in England.
West Ham. Well, the problem is you have your maybe even top 7 now with Newcastle, and that's probably all of the European places taken up between those 7 clubs. And getting into those 7 clubs, you really have to be at this point in time an elite player. I'm not sure Alistair Johnston will ever be able to achieve that, but that's perfectly fine. We got to be also realistic as Canadian fans that not every player needs to sign for Manchester United or Barcelona. Celtic, by John Herdman's very own definition, is a club that plays regular Champions League football in a solid European league. So he defines that as a tier 1 level. And I think Celtic, even if Johnston were to play the rest of his career at Celtic, I think that's a very high level that he has achieved. Being a starter for Celtic is nothing to turn your head to. It's something that's an amazing opportunity. It's playing at a very high level. Obviously, it's hard to foresee a player staying at a club for extended periods of time, especially in the modern day. But definitely, I agree with you there, Paul, that Alistair Johnston needs to try and stay at Celtic for a couple of years. Obviously, if the opportunity arises to move to a bigger club, you obviously take it. But if it's maybe a bit of a lateral move, maybe stay at Celtic, especially because you have Champions League football there, compared to maybe moving to a team in the Premier League that's in a relegation battle. Yes, maybe more publicity, maybe the wages may be a little bit more higher, but it's also a risk going to a club like that as well, where Celtic, they're going to be performing at an elite level. Worst case scenario, they should always be in the top 2 of the Scottish Premiership, if not winning it every season. So I think it's an amazing opportunity. And that is the final whistle. Thank you to Paul for joining me for the interview. And make sure you check out FC13 Canadian Soccer Podcast. As I mentioned earlier, the links are in the description below. And thank you for joining us here on Canadian Footy Fan Channel, content for fans, by fans. A reminder to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and give your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I have been your host, Chris Talks Footy, signing out.